In this video, I'll take these pieces of shiny new plank from the hardware store and try to make them look old and weathered. To achieve that effect, I will distress the wood in various ways and make a concoction of steel wool and vinegar that hopefully will give the new planks a gray sun-weathered look. I will also make strong black tea that will be applied to the wood first. I'll explain why in the next chapter, after I have made the vinegar steel wool solution. I'm going to use extra much steel wool as I want a strong solution for a darker color. Should it become too dark, I can just dilute it with more vinegar later. The mixture will need to sit for a few days to develop. As gas forms during this process, I'll leave the lid loosely screwed on so it can escape. Since you probably already know how to make tea, I'll use this part to explain why it should be applied to the wood. Tea contains natural compounds called tannins, which are found in many plants, including tea leaves and various types of wood. Black tea, in particular, has a higher concentration of tannins compared to other types of tea, making it ideal for the wood aging process. When the tannins in black tea come into contact with a vinegar and steel wool solution, a chemical reaction occurs. The steel wool, dissolved in the vinegar, produces iron acetate. This iron acetate reacts with the tannins, creating a dark, aged appearance on the wood. This reaction not only deepens the color of the wood, but also provides a more even and authentic weathered look. It's important to apply the tea first because it ensures the wood absorbs a consistent amount of tannins. Without this initial treatment, the colorization can be uneven, resulting in patches of varying darkness. This preparation step helps achieve a more uniform and professional finish. One side will have a distressed effect, while the other side will be left untouched and have different layers of the iron acetate for comparison. I'll just bang some nails, nuts, and bolts on the first one and see how that turns out. We'll take a closer look at how it turned out later. The second one I'll use a drill wire brush on. We'll look closer at this one too when the rest are done. I'll use a rotary tool with a saw blade on the third one to make tons of small cuts. Well, this is making a mess and gonna take a long time. I'll go outside and do the rest. Then we look at the results after the next one. The last one I'll use a gauge on to make lots of canals, or what to call it. Lesson learned. Watch your fingers. This is the first one where I just banged it around with various stuff. The second one that I used the wire brush on. It gave the wood a nice rough look. This is the third one that I used the rotary tool with a saw blade on. It turned out awesome. Will be interesting to see how it will look after I have applied the iron acetate solution to it. And here's the last one where I used the gauge. This one turned out nice too. A narrower gauge to make even more canals might have been even better. While waiting for the iron acetate solution to develop, I'll apply the black tea to the planks to get that part out of the way. When the black tea is applied, the wood should be left to dry for some hours for the wood to maximize tannin absorption and prevent dilution when applying the steel wool and vinegar solution. Dry tannins in the wood will also react more effectively with the iron acetate solution, ensuring a deeper and richer color. This is what it looks like after 24 hours. The steel wool has started to dissolve in the vinegar, and there are particles of it floating around and laying at the bottom of the jar. After 48 hours, there is barely anything left of the steel wool. The liquid is quite dark now, but it's mostly because all the particles got stirred up when I moved the jar. I have been stirring now and then, and this is what the stir stick looks like now. There are lots of small bubbles coming from the bottom of the jar where all the steel wool particles are. This means that the corrosion process is still happening. I'll leave it as it is now and check back tomorrow. Meanwhile, an unforeseen reaction occurred on the planks where I used metal tools to distress the wood. Residue from the tools must have rubbed off on the wood, causing this reaction after I applied the black tea. This could cause unwanted results when I apply the iron acetate solution, as some parts of the wood are already stained now. Not a big deal on these sample pieces since they won't be used for anything, so from this we take with us this lesson. If you're distressing wood with metal tools, apply the iron acetate solution right after the black tea has dried. Waiting too long can cause unwanted gray spots due to the reaction between the metal residues and tannins. 3 days have passed now and all the steel wool has fully dissolved in the vinegar. All that remains is some gray foamy goo on the top and small particles at the bottom of the jar. It's still bubbling slightly, indicating that the corrosion process is ongoing. I'll leave it for another day, then strain it to remove any remaining steel wool particles and side waste. There are barely any bubbles forming after 4 days, indicating that the reaction process is complete. There's no need for it to sit any longer. The solution can now be sieved to remove any remaining residue and side waste. I also made a backup batch using only half the amount of steel wool. It has also been sitting for 4 days, and the steel wool is fully dissolved and no more bubbles are forming. This weaker batch has developed an unwanted rusty color, unlike the grayish color of the strong batch. It has indeed started to rust, so I had to do some extensive research to figure out why this happened with the weaker solution, but not with the batch where I used lots of steel wool. I'll explain this in detail while we go through the sieving process in the next segment. The weak solution rusted because it had a lower concentration of iron. With less steel wool, not all of it converted into iron acetate. This left some iron unreacted, which oxidized and formed rust, causing the brown color in the weaker solution. Even though the weak solution had more acidic vinegar relative to the amount of steel wool, it didn't convert all the iron into iron acetate. This seems counterintuitive, because you'd expect more acidity to help dissolve more iron. However, the key factor is that the reaction rate between the steel wool and vinegar depends on the amount of iron present. With less steel wool, the reaction is less efficient and may not be fully complete before the acidity is used up. As a result, some iron remains unreacted and forms rust, even if there's ample vinegar available. The higher amount of steel wool in the strong solution ensures that there is sufficient iron to react fully with the vinegar. This results in a complete conversion into iron acetate. Iron acetate is stable and does not rust, leading to a cleaner, gray color. To avoid rust in your iron acetate solution, it's generally better to use more steel wool rather than less. An excess of steel wool ensures that there is enough iron available to react with the acetic acid, allowing for a more complete conversion into iron acetate. This minimizes the risk of rust formation, as iron acetate itself does not rust. Any leftover undissolved steel wool won't affect the solution significantly and can be filtered out, like I'm doing now. The iron acetate solutions are now ready to be used. Next up is to see how they turn out when applied to the wood that's already been treated with black tea. I'll apply the weak rusty solution on the bottom planks and the strong one on the top planks. I'm going to wait half a day between each coat. Although the chemical process in the wood can take up to 48 hours to fully develop, the most noticeable changes occur within the first 10 hours. This strong solution is way too potent. Although it gives a nice brown color, it's not what I'm looking for. I'll give it more undiluted coats anyways just to see how dark it will get. The weak solution is not going the right way either. It does seem to be getting a reddish look, and that's not what I'm aiming for. Let's try some that I have diluted 50% with vinegar and see how that goes. Still dark. I diluted the diluted solution 50% more. That didn't make much difference. Guess I'll dilute it a third time. Now it seems like we are on the right track. I'll let everything sit for 10 hours, then apply another coat on the planks before I hit the bed. Tomorrow we'll see what the first coats looks like after 24 hours. Not much difference between 1 and 2 coats on the bottom planks, where I use the weak solution. On this one, I'll apply some black tea on the second iron acetate coat and see how that turns out. Adding a coat of black tea after applying iron acetate can further darken the wood, even without additional coats of iron acetate. This is because the black tea infuses the wood with tannins, which react with the iron already present in the wood. So, if you're not seeing much difference with multiple coats of iron acetate, try adding another layer of black tea to bring out a richer, darker tone. This tea I made some days ago is living its last hour. Now I'm adding a third coat of the strong solution on top of the black tea. Doubt it will get much darker than it currently is, though. Small particles of steel wool may not have fully dissolved or reacted. These can clump together over time, especially if there is any remaining acetic acid in the solution that continues to react with residual iron particles. If you notice any lumps in your solution, just give it another sieve before applying it. This one I'll give a third coat of the weak solution. Something in between these two shades would be perfect, as one is a bit too weak and the other too dark. And now we wait. I'll also take this container and give it a coat of black tea and diluted solution and see how that turns out. The ones using the weak rusty solution turned out boring. They also has the wrong color. This This one where I used 2 coats of the weak solution and an additional coat of black tea gave a beautiful brown color though. But it doesn't look weathered. The 4 planks that I made distressed effects on got itty-bitty too dark, but it came pretty close to the real thing. This gauge effect didn't turn out very nice though due to the uneven colorization. This didn't blow my mind either, but it could have been cool with a solid paint, then sanded down to make it look worn. This one where I used the steel brush is the most natural looking. We'll take a look at the samples in daylight in a bit to see their true color. This one also turned out nice. The cut effect would have been more visible if the solution was a bit brighter though. And on the left side we have the closest match to a true sun-weathered color. It has 1 coat of the strong solution diluted 3 times. 10% darker, and it would have been perfect. The box turned out great. Even without any distressed wood effects, it looks weathered. I used a 1:11 dilution ratio on the strong solution to achieve this shade of gray. And here are the ones where I used the undiluted solution. Not much difference between coats after the first one. It's not really an ugly color. I just don't need it. Also, I have bottles of brown stain similar to this anyways. Now let's take a look at it outside and compare it to real sun-weathered wood. I also gave my fabulous homemade dog gate a coat. It turned out pretty nice even though it is a bit darker than what I aimed for. Now let's compare the samples with my neighbor's weathered yard steps and see how close the color came. Around 20% too dark. The left side is a pretty close match, although stained a bit uneven. So now we know how to get a true weathered color. It just takes a lot of testing with dilutions to get the desired shade. That was that for this video. Thank you for skipping around.